This is INCRadio, DCEM 954, the voice of truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ or Iglesia ni Cristo.
Hello, good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone tuning in. Welcome to INC Radio Florida. I'm Sister Elida Sanchez from Orlando, Florida, and I'm very, very excited for today's show because the interviewer is now the interviewee. So, very excited for what this show has to come. But before we hop into our program, I do want to greet our brother Carlitos Medina. He is our assistant district minister here in the District of Florida. A very happy birthday. So happy birthday, po. We hope you have a great day today. But now, going into our topic is about raising kids' confidence and helping them believe in themselves. Now, of course, I can't speak for that. I don't have any kids. So that is why we have Brother Robert Tapalis on there. How are you, Brother Robert?
Hey, good morning, Sister Lida, and great job opening the show today, by the way. And I love how you threw that in there that the normally the interviewer is now the interviewee. This is my first time on the other side of the mic for in a very long time, so I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Me too, me too. And I know that going into, raising children in their confidence, in believing themselves, there is a fine line, right, between confidence and ignorance. And I feel that maybe some people don't know the difference. So that is what we will be hopping into today. So, what does confidence really mean in children? Brother Rob, what do you think it is?
Well, I was going to throw the back at you. I mean, and I think you're right. There is a very fine line between being truly confident and then all of a sudden kind of transitioning into arrogance because, it's sometimes difficult to kind of distinguish between that. Um, true confidence is believing and understanding one's own ability, right? I understand what my limitations are. I understand how far I can go. And I have a sense of security in knowing that I'm able to do certain things. So I'm confident in that sense. I think when you get into that aspect where you're now talking about arrogance is really where you start to not only, you have kind of this overinflated view of your abilities, which kind of extends into things you probably aren't capable of doing. But more importantly, that makes you feel kind of superior to other people, right? I think the term that they use is that you feel better than everybody else, and that's kind of where that line of confidence kind of crosses over.
Yeah, I think it's very important for even children to understand the difference as well growing up, because sometimes you raise overly confident children and people will think they're arrogant. So I think it's very important to raise them into that, the difference between that, and raising them to believe in themselves so that they are confident and they also have that humbleness to themselves as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I fully agree. Now, with self-confidence, how do you think that would impact their emotional health, friendships, and academics?
Actually, I think it does have a great impact on all three of these aspects. And actually, Clea Tech, if you could put us in thumbnail mode, please, Paul. This way I can actually have a conversation with Sister Lida. But when we talk about self-confidence and what impact it has on emotional health and friendships and academics, self-confidence impacts all of these if you think about it, right? Because self-confidence can have impact on your ability to create relationships with others. Because I think what happens typically is if you aren't self-confident, you're kind of shy, right? Which is typically what people would call it. But then you tend to also back off because you're afraid of rejection, because you don't have enough confidence in your ability to build a relationship. Academics, that kind of goes without saying, because if you aren't confident in your abilities, it's going to impact your ability to do well in school. You're always going to feel like, well, It doesn't matter how hard I study, I'm just not going to be good enough to pass this test, which then carries all over into your adult life when you start working. And then you lack confidence in being able to be successful in your job because you aren't being able to believe in yourself enough. And when you talk about emotional health, in all aspects of it, right? If you aren't confident, that means that you typically have a very poor self-esteem. And when you're looking at yourself, it's difficult because at that point you start really just kind of over self-deprecate. You always look at yourself as being not good enough.
Hmm. And I know that sometimes, like, we joke about that, you know, but
Yeah, I
I
mean,
understand that
self-deprecation is kind of a
sometimes.
thing, right? I,
Right,
I do it all the time because I
right.
just I just kind of joke about myself. But
Hmm.
I think when it gets to a point though where you're kind of doing it constantly, then it's no longer funny. It's now just really something serious that you're overly critical about yourself.
Hmm. And now you're concerned for your kid. You're like, okay, a
Yeah, like
little,
like what's
little
really
much.
going on here?
Yeah, there's something going on here. I feel like I was gonna say something about the academics as well. Um, feel that when kids, or speaking on my experience, you know, I feel that my parents raised me to be confident and to know, and believe that I know my stuff. But when you go into school, you're also surrounded by more people that will bring you down, so
Hmm.
I feel like that's going into our next little keynote here, going into those milestones and building their confidence during their childhood, and then growing up to when they are associating with other people. Talk a little bit more about that first with infants and toddlers.
Yeah, well, and it's that's a great point because when they start going into school, that's when you start to very at the very early stages of actually facing competition, right?
Mhm,
Competitiveness with people in your classes. But a lot of people don't realize that the milestones for building confidence begins at infancy, because building self confidence starts with them starting to build secure attachments with the people who care for them, like their parents, their caregivers, and then they start to develop what's known as early emotional awareness, which is kind of being able to express their emotions. Like, RJ and Audrey gave birth to mine and sister Lou's first grandson. And just watching him over these last 12 months, he just turned one, and watching him over these last 12 months kind of start to develop these emotions on his own, right? Joy and sadness is something that a lot of people think kids just come equipped with, because the first thing that happens when they're born is they cry. But you also have, like, you could sense when they're doing things that are funny, that they laugh, and then that they're happy when they're doing certain things. They also start to express frustration. These are all milestones for these children, and building those milestones early starts to establish some of that confidence. And then of course you have the big ones, which are the mastering accomplishments of new skills like walking and talking for the first time. That helps to build confidence. And then when you get into the preschool age for children, that's when they start to do things like learning how to develop self-control. I know some adults that still haven't yet developed self-control,
it
but
starts at preschool.
it starts in preschool, so just remember that. But self-control is one of those things that is a milestone for children. And then when we start to talk about their cognitive development and learning how to problem solve, right, early on, those are things that start to build confidence, because as they do this problem solving with puzzles and with toys and building blocks, you'll start to see slowly that confidence begins to build. And then of course at that age, social skills or when they start to develop with children, sharing, learning how to share,
Mhm,
teaching them how to share. Those kind of social skills, as they develop them, they start to develop social acceptance, and that translates into self-confidence. And then of course later on in life, when they get into their childhood milestones, they need to start developing a sense of purpose. And we talked about this before the show, right? When, as an early child, learning a sense of purpose, like being able to be a contributor to the household, whether it's in chores. Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, right? Giving your kids chores will actually make them feel more confident. Next time you have, as parents, you have to give your kids chores, you tell them it's because I'm helping you work on your self confidence. Go take out the trash, or
they'll they'll
go
be
mow
like,
the
all
lawn.
right.
You're going to feel real self confident after you finish mowing that lawn back there. But but that it serves a purpose. It gives them a sense of contribution into the household. And then, of course, independently problem solving. We're going to talk about that in a little while. And then, most importantly, especially in later childhood, learning how to develop resilience and positive self talk, because those are things that I think are so important, especially at that young age, for them to start having a kind of a good outlook of themselves, or start to develop that self esteem and learning how to be resilient. So I think we're going to be talking about that here in just a second.
Yeah, I think resilience is super important. I know a lot of kids that will do something and it's hard at first, so then they just give up, right? They're like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
So I agree that resilience is super important to teach, and I wonder how, I want to know, kind of dig into your brain and your knowledge on how you do that. Like, how do you build resilience in your children?
Mhm.
So with that, what are some common confidence killers that may be that you've noticed with children and your kids specifically?
Yeah. Well, and sometimes the biggest confidence killers, unfortunately, are the parents,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Mhm,
I mean, it's kind of a frightening thought,
mhm,
and it's easy because I think as parents we sometimes want to be able to keep our kids grounded. Like that's our very first objective, is to make sure that our children are grounded, because we're so afraid that we don't want them to become arrogant. We
mhm,
don't want them to grow up to be arrogant kids. But just as there's a fine line that crosses you from being self-confident to being arrogant, there's a fine line between helping to keep them grounded and just absolutely destroying their self-confidence. And
mhm.
that happens when you are overcritical for them. You set these unrealistic expectations. I remember growing up that when you come home with something less than an A on the paper, you come home with a B plus, it's like, well, what happened? Did you not study enough? Or
Right.
come home with like a D on my paper. I said, "Look, it says dandy." That's what I, you know. Or
D for
I got an
delightful.
yeah, D for delightful. I got an E for effort. But it's important that we understand that overcriticism is sometimes what's going to lead to our children just completely not having any confidence at all, which then of course has its own impacts down the road. Because now at that point they're just not going to want to even try,
Mhm,
because they just don't feel like they have the skills, because that's
mhm,
what we've kind of ingrained to them. Sister Lulu and I had, were raising RJ and Kat, and because there's such a wide number of years between the two of them, there's 9 years between
mhm.
RJ and Kat. And so we always looked at RJ as being kind of the petri dish. He was our social experiment, and so we
As
tried.
most first children are.
Yeah, we tried everything, but see, it backfired, because then usually if you have children back to back, then that means that you can course correct and 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 kind of address those things right away. But there was like this 9 year gap, and then everything that we remember teaching RJ as he was growing up. Then all of a sudden, when Kat showed up 9 years later, we're like, I don't remember any of that
How do
stuff.
you how do you yeah, how do you do this
I don't
again?
know how to do this. But but I think what's most important is that they just keep understanding that we don't want to be overcritical, because it was important for us to have children that weren't, um, arrogant in the household, but we also didn't want them to feel as if they weren't able to accomplish things, right? And that's where comparing kids is really tough. It's so easy to try to push your children, because you may think that you're kind of motivating them by pointing to other things to compare them to, like your brother, your sister doesn't do that, or look how good your brother was at school, or look, how nice and neat your sister keeps her room, right? um, Comparing children is another way to kill confidence, because each child is independent. Each child is an individual, and they develop differently. They have different triggers. They have different things. We've used the term before. There's different ways that they express themselves, their love languages. We need to be able to understand and treat them as individuals in order for them to be able to really kind of develop their own sense of worth, the sense of self-confidence. So comparing the siblings and peers, and I just really hope no one ever compares your children to social media influencers. Um, not not good at
Yeah.
all. But just comparing them to others is just really unhealthy, because we need to be able to treat our children as their own individuals, right?
Yeah, I think it's also important. when you're teaching your children, because naturally sibling rivalry, and I feel like we talked about that on the show before.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally, that's gonna happen because you have another child or another person that same almost the same age, so you're kind of constantly trying to outdo that person or whatever, but it's to teach your children that, hey, okay, that's normal, but when it gets a little too much, comparing them to each other, I feel like that will n- it's going to increase the rivalry, but in a bad way. So,
It will.
yeah.
It will,
So,
and without a doubt, and it creates kind of this animosity and
right.
resentment between them as well, which isn't,
Mhm.
just we don't need any more hurdles.
Mhm.
So it's very difficult to try to overcome that later in life because then the one child always resents the other.
Mhm.
'Cause
Mhm.
they're
And you
constantly
know what? That does make sense on why that would be a lack of encouragement or opportunities to try new things for the kids because they're like, "Oh, I'm not good. I'm not as good as my brother in this, so I'm not even gonna try." So that makes sense now that I'm like thinking about it. Like thinking back on my childhood too. Like, well, no wonder.
Mhm.
So I think it's so important for kids, and I'm like also talking to myself in the future that when I have kids, I should encourage them, try it even if you think you're not good, because you never know if you are, if you don't try. Yeah.
Right. It's about the effort,
Hmm.
right? About the effort is the fact that they've tried versus the results.
Right.
Now, that's not to say that, they can try half-heartedly all the time because mom and dad don't really care whether I have a good outcome, right? Well, I tried and I still got a C. Sorry,
Hmm.
but I tried. That's not what we're getting at. What we're getting at is we want them to be able to try new things. We want to encourage them to try new things and focus on, if it's the first time you're doing it, then, we don't have really high expectations, right? Lower the expectations. I used to say that all the time to Sister Lulu, that the way that I got through life was that I have very low expectations. And by having very low expectations, I always pleasantly surprise myself, right? In if you have super high expectations, then you sometimes can often set yourself up for failure, right? So you need to understand, but that comes with experience, right? Experience is the greatest teacher because at that point you start to learn what your limits are. And remember, early on we talked about self-confidence versus arrogance is knowing your capabilities.
Hmm.
And if you're able to do that, that's really going to help because then at least you're going to be willing to try because you know how far it is that you can actually go.
Hmm. So, hopping back on common killers of self confidence, we're going on the other side of building that self confidence. So, when you were raising Sister Kat and Brother RJ, despite their 9-year difference, how are you able to bring that building block of confidence to them, to the children that they are today?
Well, I think what we just touched on was encouraging effort, making them try new things. It's okay to try new things because that's how you grow, right? If you don't go beyond your comfort level, if you don't encourage them to be able to try new things, and they're going to be stuck and they're not going to grow. It's about that growth mindset. We want them to be able to say, it's okay if I try new things and I don't succeed right away. At least it's something that I'm trying because that way I can learn and then continue to do better, hopefully, if I try it again.
Hmm.
And that extends to everything from playing sports to playing an instrument to, trying to challenge yourself with certain skills. You've got to be able to encourage them to do that. And they've got to know at the same time that you're not going to be overcritical for them. Of them, you're going to encourage them. Those are key important things. I mean, I know that uh, it sounds like a bell that I keep ringing over and over and over again, right? But it's about the parents and how the parents really support their children that helps to build that confidence for them.
I think it's oftentimes, well, me specifically, is whenever I do something, I always look to my parents first. So I
Mhm.
agree with
That's
you.
great.
Yeah, so I agree that like you, it really is based on the parents and their reaction to how that child did something. So, that encouraging effort really does bring out that growth mindset. Now, with teaching kids problem solving and independence, kind of touching base on that, I my mom, and I learned this from my mom is a really great problem solver, and she likes to do things
Most moms
on her
are.
own. Yeah, I know, and I always wondered, I'm like, "Mom, how are you, like, so good at problem solving?" Or how do you know what to do? Or how do you already know what's gonna happen if this happens? And she told me is that, like, "Well, I try it in the way that I think it is, and if it doesn't work out, then that's what I tell you." So I'm like, "Okay, so it really does stem from really trying, you know?" And, another thing is, I've seen research say that hobbies, like having hobbies,
Mhm.
like arts and crafts and all that, that also increases problem solving and independence in kids. So I feel that maybe that's also a good thing to encourage your kids to have, right? Like hobbies and different interests. Do you think the same? Do you agree?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that again, this goes back to that whole growth mindset. Getting out of the same, out of the same routine that they're always in, so this way they can try new things, and
Mhm.
developing hobbies, especially, is a great way of learning to a couple things. One is they're learning new skills, they're learning new things, whether that hobby happens to be something like a sport or collecting something, or gaming, right? That's a hobby, as long as everything's done within reason, right?
Right. Gaming.
Within restraint. That's my disclaimer. But learning how to do all of those things really grows their level of experience
Mhm.
in the world, and it gives them a sense of being able to do a couple things. One of them is manage time.
Mm.
Right, because sometimes people have this kind of attitude that once they start something, they kind of get sucked into it, and then that consumes their whole life, and they don't have time for anything
Oh,
else.
that's so true. I agree. Yeah.
Learning new hobbies, it's important for you to be able to learn how to budget time to be able
Mhm.
to do that. And then, so budgeting time, it's a problem solving thing, right? And
Mhm.
learning a little bit of that independence. So yeah, absolutely, I agree. I think hobbies are a great way for them to start being able to build some self-confidence sort of characteristics that way too.
Mhm. And then when they do try these things, the power of positive reinforcement and affirmations, I feel that parents, we touched on this earlier as well, that parents always want to do things for their kids, right?
Mhm.
So parents always want to praise them. But sadly, parents aren't going to be there forever. So how would you, or what's your advice in having your child have that self-talk of positive reinforcement and affirmation whenever things don't go their way or whenever things don't work out?
Yeah, I think that as parents, we are probably, especially when they're younger, the single most important source of them being able to build some of that self confidence through our positive reinforcement of the things that they try, the things that they do, and giving them affirmations, because it gives the children the understanding that we're always going to have their back for as long as we're here. I mean,
Mm,
you brought up a great point. I used to talk about this all the time, about letting your children make decisions and make mistakes, because that's how they're going to learn. Because if we do everything for our kids and we take care of all of the big decisions for them, we clean the room for them, we do their laundry for them, we do all the cooking for them, we do all of that for them, even into adulthood. I'm not calling any parents out, but you know who you are. And if they're adults, we're not going to be around forever. And I talk about preparing our children for that time when we're not there for them anymore. Do they know how to cook? Do they know how to pay their bills? Do they know how to file their taxes? Do they know how to do all of these things that as adults we take for granted and we do for our kids?
mhm,
We need to give them the opportunity to learn how to do those things for themselves for their own good, because we're
mhm,
actually doing them a disservice, right?
mhm. And this is something you can't learn at school. Like you gotta learn from your
Right.
parents, they don't
Right.
teach this in school for
Math,
sure.
math, math, trigonometry, and biology aren't going to help you file your taxes.
Right?
Well, maybe math will,
Maybe
but
a little bit of math.
those basic life skills are things that you've got to be able to allow your children to be able to learn. And trying things, they're going to fail, right?
Mhm,
They're going to fail. They're going to make mistakes, and right now, for them to make those mistakes while we're still around is the best time,
right.
because we can correct it for them. We can help
Mhm.
them. We can guide them. We can encourage them. When we're not around anymore, then they're kind of on their own to try to figure
Mhm.
that out.
And that's where that resilience comes in. I see that it's a full circle, They're you allow them, you create this space for them to fail, but then you're there to support them and back them up like, "Hey, it's okay." I have a couple friends that I feel like they're a little too hard on themselves. They have that inner monologue in themselves that are like, "Oh, I did this, or I'm terrible, I'm horrible." But if you're the parent, that's where you gotta tell them, like, don't think that, you know? That's
Yeah,
where that resilience comes in for sure, yeah.
absolutely. I mean, kids have to be able to start at a very early age understanding that it's okay to make mistakes,
Mhm,
and that you can bounce back. That's the absolute definition of resilience, right? Is
mhm.
being able to bounce back from adversity. So
So now, going into this last portion of our show, we're cutting it short. It's the fastest 30 minutes of I honestly I think in my life. It goes by so quick. But what is your practical tips that you have for parents, maybe new parents, maybe parents who have been here, maybe soon to be parents? What are some tips that you have for them?
well, I got knock these out really quick. One is you want to start building daily confidence, building habits for them. That means giving them chores, giving them small choices. Let them pick what's going to be for dinner. Not all the time because you're not going to survive on macaroni and cheese and
Chicken
pizza.
nuggets.
Yeah, and chicken nuggets. But let them make those small choices. When you're starting a project at home, get them involved and let them make small choices. So this way they can start to feel, like we said before, like they're contributing because they need to feel that they start to understand their place, in the household, right? You want to model self confidence as parents. Our children look up to us, right? We're the ones that are supposed to know everything, and we may not always know everything, but we need to be able to model that self confidence that even if we don't know, we do know where to find the answer. Because if constantly, when they constantly look at us, if the answer is always I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, that's exactly the opposite of what we're trying to build in our children, right? We want to have them build not the self-confidence, so in being able to understand, even though if you don't know the answer outright, you can at least go out and get the answer, or you know who to go to get that answer. So we've got to model that behavior in order for our children, because our children look up to us and they're going to model how we are. We want to use praise wisely, like we mentioned. You don't want to just have it be general, like, oh yeah, good job, always a good job, always great work. Be specific. If they did something good on their homework, tell them that it was a great job nailing that exam. That B plus was really good because I know that you were struggling and you really pulled it off. So congratulations to you. You want to make them very specific, very targeted praise. So this way they understand exactly what they did well and that was something that they deserved, right? And then lastly, of course, we want to always create a safe space for them to be able to express their fears and doubts. It's all about communication. All of this entire presentation is about being able to communicate with our children and allowing our children to be able to communicate with us openly. I think I was talking to Sister Lyda in about 2 or 3 weeks. We're going to have a show specifically on how important it is for parents to have real, genuine conversations with their children because too many kids view conversations with their parents as every conversation has an agenda. Like,
Mhm,
there's a reason why we're talking to you, other
mhm,
than, I just want to know how you're doing. I just
mhm,
want to know how your day went. Those types of conversations are things that we're going to be having, with our children. And I think in 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to be talking about that topic. So please tune in when we do that. But yeah, these tips are designed really to just kind of give you guys some introspection into why it's so important for uh, us to be able to start building that confidence. And speaking of self confidence, I want to applaud you, Sister Elida, on hosting the show today. You
mhm.
demonstrated great self confidence. Your parents obviously did a fantastic job in raising you. So good job. Good job, Paul.
Thanks, mom and
Um,
dad.
all right. Well, and as Sister Elida mentioned, we are down to the bottom of the hour because we are the fastest 30 minutes on radio. But we want to really thank all of you for joining us today on INC Radio Florida. We want you to please stay tuned because INC Radio Washington, D.C. is going to be coming up next. But next week, please tune in because we're going to have another fantastic show with a great topic. And we look forward to seeing you. But for now, have a great week. This is Brother Robert DePaulis, the interviewee for a change, and our interviewer and host, Sister Elida. We thank you there in Orlando. Have a great Saturday or Sunday weekend, all week for all of you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for tuning in.